Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Deal. We have broken down, I believe, every single transfer portal commitment for South Carolina over the last couple of weeks. Now seems like a good time to take a step back and evaluate kind of a bird's eye view approach of, hey, what has South Carolina done in the transfer portal? We got two things to do. One, transfer portal grade. Number two, class superlatives. The South Carolina fans who've been rocking with the boys for the last couple of years, y'all know we do this for the high school recruiting class. Now we're going to do it for the transfer portal class. Fired up to get into it. Dill, overarching take on South Carolina's transfer portal efforts. The real work that South Carolina put in was keeping this roster in place going into 2025. Look, in this modern era of college football, it's really fun to talk about the new players coming in, and you will see some programs that make additions that go 20 plus, 20 plus new players coming into the program. What nobody wants to talk about is, hey, what players are you losing? Because a lot of cases, players, their program's losing some good players when they want to go be that aggressive. The thing that stands out to me the most, South Carolina, I mean this respectfully, didn't really lose players that they did not want to lose. And I promise you, like teams were checking in on Lenora Sellers, teams were checking in on Dylan Stewart. South Carolina taking care of their homegrown talent, keeping that young nucleus at South Carolina heading into 2025 was, to me, the biggest victory for South Carolina. Now we get to talk about the new additions coming in. Before we do, and as always, to the South Carolina fans, one, we can't thank you guys enough. This program has been so fun to talk about over the last couple of weeks, and the amount of support that the South Carolina fans have shown the boys, it's been amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, let it fly in the comment section. Transfer portal grades, class superlatives that you guys would like to give. Dill, without further ado, I'm going to give you the T-box here. Let's start with the transfer portal grade. You look at the 12 new additions. You look at what they kept on this roster. How are you grading out South Carolina over the last couple of weeks?
I give it a B plus, and it certainly does start with not losing the guys you don't want to lose. Like those are still going to be the leaders of this team, the Dylan Stewarts, obviously guys like Nick Harbor, and certainly Lenora.
Lenore,
Like
was making sure you added Lenora Sellers.
Those are going to be the guys leading the way. I think we all kind of know that. There's one glaring weakness, I think, to this portal class, and that's probably not getting enough proven SEC caliber guys in the defensive line. Like,
yeah,
you lose you're kind of three guys at the defensive tackle spot, and you don't really replace them with anyone who's really bona fide proven.
Yep.
Like, interesting guys for sure, like Xavier Hardy, Brownlow Dindy, like a lot of potential there, but right now you don't get enough probably guys that, okay,
you have question marks about the proven commodities on the defensive line.
And we that's all a really hard position to hit from the portal. So
Agreed.
You certainly got to like factor that in.
Agreed.
Aside from that, I don't really have any problems. I think the one other that a lot of people seem to feel is that linebacker spot. Yep. But there's a lot of young talent in that group, like Wendell Gregory, a guy like Fred Johnson, like guys you can certainly be excited from. And just because they don't have, quote, experience doesn't mean I don't think South Carolina is really happy with what they have there in kind of their ability to kind of step in and fill the shoes of some guys who are really.
Yeah, that's not like how I look at it. My knock on the linebacker, well, I really, the South Carolina fans know Justin Okoronkwo is like my guy. I am fired up that they went out and got him. The one knock that you have is I wouldn't have minded a linebacker, whether it's at the Power 4 or the G5 level, that's played a lot of football, because you're going to be trying out linebackers that are just inexperienced. And that's a position that you want to have a guy that's played a lot of football in.
But I'm not even sure that frankly existed in the portal. Like I look at the group, it's all lower level guys and guys that frankly, when I turn on the film, I'm not sure the athleticism was quite there. Like, they can rack the stats up in certain leagues, but I just looked, there weren't a ton of off-ball linebackers that I frankly would think, oh yeah, he'll probably be better than Fred Johnson or Wendell Gregory or Jaron Willis. Some of these guys that are hyper talented, athletic as you kind of want them to be. I just don't know that it really existed in the portal.
Yeah, I agree. And Justin Okoronkwo was a guy that, hey, if you want to take a gamble on a guy, it's the guy you want to gamble on. To the defensive line. I think South Carolina fans all feel the same way about that. That is by far my biggest question mark for South Carolina going into spring practice. And you probably will see them try to make some additions after spring practice at that position. The one other position's wide receiver. I think, look, there's kind of a reason that South Carolina didn't you didn't get as aggressive as we thought they were going to at the wide receiver position. What does that tell me? They probably like what they have on the roster. I mean, Nick Harbor, that light's turning on for him. You saw Mazeo Bennett play some really good football as a freshman. You have some, again, what I think is one of the most talented high school wide receiver classes we've seen South Carolina sign in a while with Malik Clark and Donovan Murph. I think South Carolina likes their wide receiver position, and they weren't. Look, did they kick it around with Casey Concepcion? Yeah, sure. You do because he's a really good football player. But you ain't going to get into a bidding war with him because you know you have studs on your roster. Outside of the defensive line, it's hard to really find a glaring flaw in the South Carolina roster going into 2025. I'm going to give them a B just because the line of scrimmage playing the SEC is big, and I do have question mark on the defensive line. Let's get into the superlatives. Let's start with the most impactful transfer portal addition. Dill, I would guess that we're probably going to have the same one. Who you got here?
Yeah, it's got to be Rasul Faze.
Yeah, it has to be.
It was a huge need, but also like I look at how successful a really good running back can be in this offense led by Lenore Sellers and how much pressure him alone puts on defense is like a guy who, when he gets out in space, is really dangerous, really good at making guys miss in the open field. I think that type of running back can be really successful. And frankly, I look, it's a position that they definitely needed to address. So I look at him coming in. I think he's clearly going to be running back one.
Yeah, and it's so, you said it most, like South Carolina's going to want to lean on this rushing attack. Just like they rode Rocky Sanders, you wanted a dude at the running back position. And they were patient. You know, they went after Justice Haynes, who I also think is a dude. He goes to Michigan. Hey, we're not going to go settle for a running back we don't like. Shula Faison pops in. You go make it happen. One, extremely explosive and dynamic, making people miss at the second level. I think just as importantly, Dill, he's not the biggest running back, but runs beyond his pads extremely well. I think that's by far the guy that's going to have the biggest impact on this football team. Let's go to sleeper, and I want to start here. Boaz Stanley from Troy. Dill, they didn't even have a 24/7 sports profile, Boaz Stanley, when we did his commitment breakdown. You dive into some of his stuff from Troy. Look, was not a very good tackle. Started his season off for Troy in 2024 playing tackle. He ain't a tackle. We knew that. Kicks into center. Looks great. And that was a question. Look, I think the offensive line, you brought in some veterans, guys like Newsom and guys like Nick Sharp, but you also have a lot of young talent where you feel really good about. Like Josiah Thompson, I feel like he's going to be a stud at left tackle next year. The one question mark was, hey, we don't have a ton of guys who have snapping experience, who have center experience. Boaz Stanley might be a plug-and-play center, and you're going to have some new faces, especially in the interior of the offensive line, going out getting a proven commodity at center. Look, this was not a flashy one. A lot of people had to Google Boaz Stanley along with myself. But when you dive into him, I thought it was a really good get for South Carolina here.
Yeah, and you want a good center because you don't want that position to be a problem. Just for what you said, like this can be a really good offensive line for South Carolina. I think you want a dependable center that sets the floor really pretty high because that's one thing that you probably went one of the positions that was a little bit uncertain, let's say, on that offensive line. So I'll go to my sleeper. I think it's Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy. I think the fact that he hasn't played a ton at Texas A&M yet is probably why people didn't really pay attention to the commitment.
Agreed.
Obviously, he still carries a little bit of buzz from being a five-star recruit out of high school, but it's certainly worn off to an extent for a lot of people. I look like you go to that Oklahoma State bowl game, I think, at the end of 2023.
Yep.
That's a really kind of interesting athlete you have. And he needs to play with a little bit more effort at times, needs to play with more energy. But there is a first step quickness that he has that I am really interested to see if South Carolina can kind of get him rolling and get him going. I think he'd be a really good player for this
defensive team. Line development's been elite for South Carolina. And so if you're a South Carolina fan, you're getting a guy that, yeah, he's not necessarily proven. He's dealt with some injuries at Texas A&M too. You know you're getting guys with some freaky traits coming out of high school. There was a reason he was a top 15 national prospect. Now, can you maximize those traits? That's going to be the question. I'm just going to add one more real quick, and I'm going to scroll down. Jalen Brown from Missouri. A guy that didn't play much football for Missouri as a true freshman, but another really traitsy dude. And also a guy that I'm kind of interested to see what they do with him because I looked at him coming out of high school, Dill. He was 6'5", he was 260, really big frame. with a frame that could put on a little bit more weight. And considering South Carolina's maybe looking for some more bodies on the inside, maybe Jaylen Brown kicks to the inside and puts on some weight because he's still a young kid. He's only going into a second year of college football. Traitsy dude that we kind of knew wasn't going to be a year one guy, needed some football development, so to speak. Just keep an eye on him in spring practice because I think he can be a guy that maybe emerges as a difference maker for South Carolina. Dill, that developmental piece, which certainly could be Jaylen Brown, but I think we all know where you're going with this one.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're on the same page. It's Justin Okoronkwo. Like, if you're a real sicko and you watch spring football like we do, he kind of stood out a little bit for Alabama. Like, you saw, who's that big number 41 who's running around, looks like he's a safety, got the right kind of size you want. I mean, he has the exact athletic profile that any good linebacker, I think, going forward in the future is going to have. I'm really excited to see what. Again, I don't know that he'll play a ton this year because I kind of was going on my diatribe about how kind of interested I am to see what the young South Carolina guys on the roster are going to be. But certainly a guy that might push for some time, and at some point,
look what the recipe is for Shane Beamer. Like, look how he's trying to build this thing. We're just going to go freaky guys. We're going to bet on them to become good football players. Yeah, you got a bunch of really athletic linebackers in just from a numbers game. And quite frankly, I'd throw in Sean Murphy from Florida State and Alabama there too. Like, he's a really athletic linebacker too. You feel good that a couple of those guys are going to emerge as difference makers for you in 2025. And Dill, if you don't, and you go through spring practice and say, all right, maybe these linebackers maybe aren't where we thought they were going to be, then you can go out and add, a G5 backer that's played a lot of football. But right now, I kind of like the numbers and I like the athleticism in that room. I'm going to throw you for a little loop, though. Justin Okoronkwo would be my pick. I kind of knew you'd be him. I didn't want to double up. Want to talk about another name, Dill. I'm like Aaron Nolan. I mean, I loved Aaron Nolan coming out of high school. We're lit it up in the state of Georgia at Langston Hughes. Look, he ain't going to come in and start. We know who the guy is right now. There's a real chance Lenore Sell is going to the NFL draft after this year. I mean, if he takes that step, the NFL GMs and OCs are going to be drooling over him. Well, what's your plan at quarterback after Lenore Sellers? Whether it's in 2025, whether it's in 2027 or 20, got my years mixed up. Whether it's in 2026, whether it's in 2027, you got Aaron Nolan marinating. And again, he's not going to be the guy this year. He might be the guy next year. Really talented quarterback that ensures that South Carolina is going to have dang good quarterback play over the next couple of years. And Dale, this is the thing that excites me. Aaron Nolan going to South Carolina probably had something to do with the development that he saw Lenore Sellers take. Say he took a quarterback that, quite frankly, was not a great quarterback coming out of high school in terms of being a polished quarterback. Got his polish up, became what seems to be a difference maker in the SEC going into 2025. What if you do the same thing with Aaron Nolan? And then what if the perception of South Carolina is that's a program that develops quarterbacks? And then you start getting some better quarterbacks coming to you out of high school. That kind of excites me as well. So I chose Aaron Nolan. Biggest need that was satisfied, I think this is, for me, it was Gabriel Brown-Ladindi. Now, again, it's a little bit of a, we're doubling up there, and I didn't mean to double up, but it was clearly the interior defensive line. I have a feeling you're going to go with that position too. Who you got?
Xavier Hardy, and it's cheating a little bit. He's like
JUCO guy.
Is that a transfer portal? Is that a high school recruit? It's a little bit like in between, if you will. But a guy who I think does give some interesting playmaking ability, because that's one thing that South Carolina did a really good job with from the middle of it. Like TJ Sanders, playmaker on the inside. I look at what Xavier Hardy could possibly be, a little bit undersized, perhaps, like TJ Sanders was, but a guy who I wonder if he can give them that disruption. And they like to play a little bit active with their defensive tackles. Like, I'm kind of interested to see if he can fill those shoes, if you will.
You said kind of what I thought. So one, he gets kind of filed in with the high schoolers. This is a guy that's a little bit more ready than a high schooler to play in the SEC. Number two, kind of fits the MO of defensive linemen South Carolina has had success with. Like, they want penetrators. They don't want two gappers. They want guys who can get beyond the line of scrimmage. Although Xavier Hardy probably needs to add a little bit more weight and get up to around 300 pounds, carries the weight exceptionally well and can be that kind of penetrator that South Carolina's looking for. Kind of agree that he's a sneaky one because you don't really factor him in as a transfer portal commitment, but a guy that can give you immediate production like a transfer portal addition could. Like that one as well. we'll get out of here on that. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys. We'll talk to y'all later.